Okay, let's play a little bit with terrains. I'm not the best person to do this particular type of tutorial, but maybe there'll be some insights that might help you or might not. At least tell you what not to do. I always like to start when I'm doing a layout like this, start with my character. Start with one of our biblical characters. So I have an idea of what the scale of the terrain is going to be. And we've got a couple of different types of terrains to deal with in the base version of iClone. You have the mesh medium, which are the old terrains which came from long ago, older versions of iClone, and then the newer height map large terrains. They're okay. They have their limitations, even though they have a lot of nice new features. We'll go ahead and load one in. Back up, take a look. One thing I don't like is, as far as I can tell, I'm going to go ahead and clear that. You can't move the terrain around. You have to move your characters to match the terrain. You can adjust the height of the terrain, but you can't click on it and rotate. As far as I know anyway. I'm trying to rotate and scale it, blah blah blah. I can't do that. You can modify certain things. Obviously you can take the height, turn the grid off, and you can adjust the entire relationship to the grid, which I usually like to have the basic ground level a lot of times at the grid level. So move our character over, and there we go, right about there's character. So you can adjust those things a little bit, as I say, pretty much just the height and the position, vertical position is all you can do. Now of course you can adjust the textures. You have, the beauty of it is you have a number of textures you can work with, which is kind of cool. The stone texture might not work for what you're doing, so if you're like me, I like to collect all kinds of textures, and the more the merrier. Seamless textures are the best typically, and let's get the same texture to use as the bump, and there's our bump. You can see that activated, and so you can of course color this a little more by right clicking on it and bringing up the controller, and you can make it a little more saturated in color, change the hue of the color a little bit. Obviously you can change the scaling of that particular map. If you go down here, you can adjust the tiling if you need it to be smaller. Typically you might adjust the bump the same, but you don't have to necessarily. But that's the one nice thing about the height maps. You have multiple textures which you can work on and change around and get them kind of like you want. And here's that. See, like so. So you can play with that, get that right, and then of course bring in your water. And let's go over here and find our water. And let's see here, still normal. You have a few to choose from. These are the old water textures that are holdover legacy versions, which are pretty cool. They're okay. These are the newer ones. Haven't played a lot with these, but they're pretty good. Once again, probably need to adjust the height, and you can adjust the height either by adjusting it here in the modify tab, or over here by clicking on water, hitting the W key, and I'm just scrolling my mouse wheel down, and that will adjust the height of the water as well. Now another important thing to do to modify the water is, one thing is the edge softness, so it blends a little better here, obviously. So you adjust that, bring our height up. Obviously, the wave size is crucial. The wave strength will flatten out the water a little bit. And of course the direction's a little strange here, so you can once again return to 0, and you can, with my right mouse, I'm rotating the water, and so now you might get it closer to the direction you want it to flow, depending on where the bank is and all that. So you can get your water set there. Now of course we need a sky. I use what I prefer. You can of course use the skies here that come. They're a little limited now. You can't really scale them like you used to. You can scale them, it's just not quite as easy to do. So if you choose, I really like these props called Sky Textures. This is available in the content store, I believe, or the marketplace, can't remember. But you've got a lot of really neat skies, and this is simply a prop that loads in, and obviously hit the right key and you can scale it. And I'm hitting the W key and I'm moving it down. I'll scale it some more here, really big. But this is a real nice sky, and of course you can animate it if you choose. Now one thing they did, which you really need to make sure you turn off, it's called a dome. Make sure you turn off all shadows. You don't want any shadows, and that'll save a lot of resources on your video card for sure. And of course now we have a nice reflection in the water of the sky, so that's cool. And once again we've got our character, and we know our scaling, so that works pretty cool. And of course now you can add your trees. Now if you get closer, you notice the bump map's a little too obvious, so I typically like to adjust that bump map a little more and make sure we've got the terrain selected. Go over here to modify, and let's find out which one we're looking at. I think it's this one here. There it is. Yeah. Now you can either take the strength down, or you could once again increase. Let's make that 75. Make it smaller. So you definitely want some of the roughness that a bump map can give you. Of course now our sky is still pretty small, so once again we can move our sky around. Like so. There we go. Now also the water, of course, can be scaled too. Hit the water, modify. You can change the size here. 300 might be just plenty big enough, but depending on where it's going, and once again what the rotation is going to be, so you can do that and adjust your positioning of the water. So that's a possibility for our character. Let's go and do a quick Joseph and hit. There we go. Now of course now you'd want to come and put up your trees. Let's get rid of our props here, find a tree, and there we go. Acacias. I like the acacia tree. Has a nice feel to it, like so. And start coloring your land and doing that. Now that's one terrain surface that's okay. I still have use for the old mesh maps, and let's go back. Okay, let's play with a mesh medium. Now let's just load this island. A little texture here. Once again, these are the old textures that came. Back up, see what we got. Obviously probably not too practical for a lot of situations, but what you can do that you can't do with a height map terrain is once we select the terrain, it's called island, right click on it, we can convert it to a prop, and that lets us, that gives us the old tools that we used to working with, and that's a pretty cool thing, because we can, like we can't do with the other types of terrain, the height map terrains, we can move these around, position it any way we want. And let's say get it close to our actual grid line, which is cool. But another thing that we can't do with the height maps is we can't have multiple height maps. With these old mesh, once you convert them to a prop, you can have multiples. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and now I have two, and I can have one of these in the background, let's say, and create some mountains, and so let's turn it this way. Yeah, there we go. There we go, like something along those lines. And now we have another interesting type terrain. Let's turn our grid off. Let's get our water back on, and I'm going to lower it a little bit. So this is a possibility. Let's turn our now, as I said, you can use the sky textures that come with iClone. This one, let's turn that one. Let's lose that one. Let's grab another one and see some of the issues. The reason I don't particularly like these skies. Not a lot you can do with them. They're hard to scale. You have to scale it here, typing in numbers. To rotate them, you have to type in a number to rotate. You can't just click on the sky and rotate it when you select it. For some reason, you can't do anything with it. It's really tough to play with and make it look like a decent sky. So that's why, at least I haven't found a way to do it. There may be a way, but in the old versions of iClone, you could click on it, you could scale it and rotate it real easy with your mouse. Now you have to do it here, for far as I can tell, and a bit of a pain. So as I say, I really like the sky textures that are available from the marketplace, and they are pretty cool. Now we can scale this down a little bit, raise it. Now once you've got your texture, your terrain positioned like you want it, be sure to double click on it and convert to terrain again, because now you'll see the feet of your avatars now will collide with the terrain, and that makes a big difference, and they should follow the terrain very well on the terrain, just like so. And you can play with your textures on the terrain. You just have one texture to work with is the only trick. You can let's go back to the island here and look at the modification. Let's convert it once again back to a prop. Here we go, and convert to prop. Now we can edit the texture, and you obviously don't have multiple textures. You can load a blend map in, which is nice, and that might help you with the look you're after. I don't know. You can add a bump map, which I always like to add a bump map. Some some type of image, and of course we need to scale that down to maybe 10 or so, whatever, and then we can now adjust the bump map, make it even smaller if you need to, and then of course now you can add your trees, and as we say, we can play with our coloring. And of course you could take this texture into your paint program, and by hitting launch now we can sit here and use our paint program and change the texture around, make it a lot more interesting than it is now for sure, and save that and bring that onto the texture, so that'll help too. And then of course you'll add your trees. So just some thoughts about your terrains. Hope that helps.